Grey County.
Hi, and welcome to Rogers Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. Today is one of our election specials. We have Greg Essensa, who is the Chief Electoral Officer for Ontario. Greg, welcome to Politically Speaking. It's a privilege to have you with us today.
Thank you, David. Happy to be here.
Now, your role as Chief Electoral Officer is that, I guess, you oversee the whole election process, don't you?
Yes, I oversee all 124 ridings in Ontario. I oversee the interactions and the work of all 124 returning officers. So effectively, we have 124 individual ridings, and then we ensure that they have all the materials that they need, all the support, all the resources. They actually conduct all of the hiring and the training and the securing of voting locations in their riding. They oversee the voting in the various different channels we have, and then ultimately on election day, they oversee that and eventually send the results back to us at Elections Ontario, and whoever's won those respective ridings become the new MPPs, and which party gets the most becomes the next government.
And just to be clear, your office is entirely nonpartisan, isn't it?
Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, I actually gave up my right to vote when I took this position. De facto, I am somewhat the referee, so I oversee not only the operation of the election, but I also oversee all of the campaign finance. So all of the spending and expenses done by candidates, by political parties, by constituency associations, and third parties. So I oversee all of that as well.
And aren't you also responsible for voter registration and the keeping of the electoral rolls?
Yes, that's right. So my role as Chief Electoral Officer is we have what's called a permanent register of electors here in Ontario. We get data from electors from a multitude of different sources. We get income tax data through the CRA and Elections Canada. We get driver's license information through MTO. We get health information. We get birth and death information from the Ontario Registrar General, plus municipal information. So that all goes into our database, and that ultimately forms what becomes the voters list when an election is called.
Sure. Now, just about the information it's highly secure, is it not? It's confidential.
Yes, it is. We take great pains to ensure the privacy of that information. Political parties, when an election is called, they have to have a privacy policy on place that we've approved before we'll actually share that information with those parties and or candidates.
So people can be absolutely assured that the information they give to you is secure, confidential, and shared
100%.
Only with those entitled to have it.
That's 100% correct. Yes, and we take great strides to ensure that secrecy.
Sure. It's always important. People need to feel that confidence in the electoral system and in the processes. Well, let's get into some of the actual processes of the election, because I'll be honest with you, as I looked at the Elections Ontario website, which is very easy to access, what I discover is that this is your parents' ballot box. This is different, and it's different from the last time.
It is different. There is no question that this election will be slightly different. Given obviously the major issue of being COVID and running an election during the pandemic, we started actually in the summer of 2020. I wrote to then Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. David Williams, and I asked that we establish a task force with his office and mine, and that task force that would run right through June of 2022. So we have been meeting with them every month. Since the start of this year, we meet with every 2 weeks. We get the best advice possible. So what Ontarians will see when they come to vote this election, they'll see many of the same health measures that they would see now when you go to your grocery store. We'll have the signage on the floor to ensure physical distancing. We'll have signage in all of the polls. We have hand sanitizers, we have gloves, we have masks. Any elector who shows up who doesn't have a mask, we can provide one for them. We have all of those health-related protocols, and we consistently consult with the CMOH, with his office to get the best advice possible so we can ensure that the election conducted this June will be safe and healthy for not only the workers working for us, but for electors when they come in, right? And that's really of paramount concern for myself and for Elections Ontario.
Now, in the last federal election, and I don't want to compare the two because they're two different operations, we did have the option to vote by mail. Will that be an option in this provincial election?
Yes, it will. As of May 4th, when the writs are signed, any Ontarian can come and make an application through us on our website. We've completely reformed the vote by mail manner in which we conduct it, because we've seen huge increases, not only federally, but also provincially. Those jurisdictions who ran elections like BC and Saskatchewan and New Brunswick early on, we could clearly see that there was going to be a significant increase in vote by mail. What's really unknown to us is, Ontarians, for the most part, have not taken up this channel. Last election in 2018, we only had just over 10,000 applications to vote by mail, and that in itself was a 35% increase from 2014, where we only had 6,500 applications. Last election, where we had 5.9 million people vote across the province, it really is a very, very small percentage. So we have revamped the application process. There's lots of documentation on our website about how the application process works. You will get a prepaid postage return envelope as part of the package, so you can send the ballot back. But it's open from May the 4th until May the 27th at 6 p.m. And we encourage every Ontarian, please come to our website at elections.on.ca and get as much information as you can about vote by mail, if that's one of the channels that is of interest to you, for sure.
Now, there was some confusion in the last federal election about voting by mail because there was a small number of ballots which were not counted because they were submitted late. Is that a potential? Have you covered that particular situation in the provincial voting by mail system?
We've been working very hard with Canada Post to ensure that the process is as smooth as possible and that we don't disenfranchise any elector. I would encourage all Ontarians, though, if you are considering this channel of voting by mail, to apply early, to make sure that you get your ballot, that you have sufficient time to get it back to us. Now, the deadline is May 27th at 6 p.m., but it means that you then have to get the ballot from us. You also then have to get it back in the hands of the returning officer by 6 p.m. on election day. Our law is slightly different than the federal context. Federally, you could drop the ballot off at any poll on election day. We don't have that ability because our polls are open till 9 till 9. So where our laws are different is that you have to, in fact, get that ballot back to the returning officer by 6 p.m. on election day. So I would encourage Ontarians, please take a moment to familiarize yourself with the process, because it is quite different than what they might have experienced even as recently as last September during the federal election.
That's really helpful, because I know that the voting processes are different between the two jurisdictions, but there are some similarities, and I think it's really important that we emphasize that, if dare I say it, and if you are familiar with TV trivia, you will remember, I think it was MASH, the words "vote early, vote often." Well, what you want to do is for us to vote early.
Right, absolutely.
If we're voting by mail.
If that's the channel you've chosen, for this election, what we've also done is I wrote to the legislature back in the fall of 2020, and one of the things I advocated for was to provide more opportunity for advance vote opportunities. So this election, we've moved from 5 till 10 days of advance voting. And it's also, what it's done is it's allowed the local returning officer the ability to, in fact, rotate polls. So some of the ridings, certainly within your area of exposure, some of those ridings are quite large, where the population bases, the densities of them are quite spread out. And the new law now allows the local returning officer to say, hey, I'm going to put a poll in maybe Owensound for 10 days, but I might put a poll somewhere else for 3 or 4 days, and somewhere else in the riding for another 3 or 4 days. And the idea really is to provide electors with as great an opportunity and great a choice that is convenient for them, so that they can vote. They may be quite a ways from a large urban area like an Owensound, so maybe there's going to be a poll close to them for 3 or 4 days, and they can actually vote somewhere that's much more convenient during that 10-day period.
I know I've talked to Bill Walker, who is not running in this election. He has made that decision. And we have jokingly referred to him putting a lot of kilometers on his car, driving from Dundalk to all the way up to Tobermory. So I can certainly see why polls in that voting period, those in the advanced voting period, moving around would be very, very useful. Are you intending to get that information out to people as well?
Absolutely. We are using virtually every medium possible to get information out. So we will have radio, we'll have TV ads. We're obviously on the internet, on all the social media platforms. We have our website, which is easy to use. But probably the biggest piece of information is that voter information card, right? That's the card that shows you all the voting options, all your advanced voting options, dates and times, and where you're to vote on election day. And really that starts and stops, though, with registration. And that's why you've seen us, David, really push voter registration early. We want Ontarians to come to our site at elections.on.ca and really just confirm that we have you at the right location. It literally takes about a minute. Put in your name, put in your address, your postal code, and it will come up what we have for you as the applicable mailing address. If that's correct, you just confirm. And why that's so important is, because we have a relatively short electoral period, only 29 days is our writ period. When the writ is issued, we move pretty quickly to get those 10.7 million voter cards printed and into the mail. And then once you have that card, it tells you all your options, and it actually makes the voting process easy. Because when you show up at the poll with that voter information card and one piece of ID, we can service you very efficiently, very effectively. You can get in and out, exercise your right to vote in a safe, secure fashion. So that really is key for your constituents, is really the idea. Check your information, make sure we have you at the right spot. Because if we don't, you can update it, you can change it. But then we know once the writ has been signed and issued, we can get you that voter information card in a very timely fashion.
I think one of the other things, though, is of interest is that voter information card can actually be shown on your iPhone or your smartphone. And this leads us into a conversation about the app, which is called Election On. Yes, I don't know what you call it, but I'll just call it Election On because that's what it appears on my screen. I confess I'm a bit of a techno junkie. I've downloaded it as soon as I heard it was available. And quite frankly, I'm impressed, very impressed with the ease of ability. Okay, you've got to type in some personal information to get in and register yourself. But once you're in, it's very easy to use. I'm quite impressed.
Well, thank you. We refer to it as personal voter communication. And really what it's designed for, David, is really a little changing the paradigm and how we engage with electors. Traditionally we just, and this happens at all three levels of government, municipally, provincially, and federally, is we get all the data on you and then we send you this voter information card. But we really don't give you another choice to communicate. And now with this app, what we're doing is this app will provide you as the consumer, you'll be able to see all your voting locations, your advanced poll locations. It'll map from where you are. It'll give you, walking times, driving times. It'll show you your election day voting location. It also will give you, other ways to vote. All the different channels are available on it. You can see your list of candidates, and also will give you, as you correctly articulated, it'll give you your VIC card electronically that you can actually use in most of our polls where we have technology. Our scanners will use on that. But what's most important to me on this actually is what we call the notifications piece, because this is where we change that paradigm. This is where you as the consumer, you get to decide, David, do you want SMS text from us? Great, fine. Do you want email? Sure. Do you want both? Fine, we can do that. Do you want us to notify you when there's a new candidate in your riding? We can do that. Do you want us to give you some push notifications to say, hey, tomorrow advanced polls open, or advanced polls open close to you, or notifications about, election day? And why I'm really quite excited about this is, I've been doing elections in our province for 37 years, and there's not been one election ever in my career that I've not had to move a poll on election day. There might be a health-related issue, a fire, a gas leak, or whatever the case may be. And on election day, it's really limited as to how I can communicate and get that information out. So, we put a couple of staff members in front of the Northwoods Community Center, for example, and We have to close that and move that to the Northwoods Elementary School. And maybe we can get the local CP24 type of station to do a PSA. But the reality is I really can't directly communicate with you. Now with this app, we can communicate right away and say, hey, your poll's been moved. Here's where it's moved to. And it really allows you, the consumer, now to choose how do you wish to engage with us. So it is a pilot for this election. I would encourage all Ontarians, please download it, try it, let us know what you think. We have a lot of interest from some other jurisdictions about potentially moving ahead with this. So we're quite excited to see what the uptake is from Ontarians and what their feel about it is.
I think there's also even candidate information, if I'm not mistaken, that's in the app. Both the names of the candidates, but there's information for candidates themselves that's in the app. Election financing is in there, I believe.
100%.
Very impressive.
You can get everything that you need to know about every aspect of the election through the app. We know, quite obviously that most Ontarians have some cell phone or some device, and especially the younger demographic groups, they're very engaged in using this. So this is our first foray into that digital arena. We want to, try and get into that arena and communicate with Ontarians in a little bit of a different vein, and in one that they get actually to choose how we communicate with them. So as I say, I would encourage every Ontarian, please try it out. Let us know what you think, and then we'll certainly report on it after the event.
And let's be clear that it is available both for the Apple ecosystem and the Android Google system, which is Google Play and the App Store. So
that's exactly right.
You'll find it in both places. And like I say, I'm personally quite impressed with it. Looking forward to the results, and we'll see what happens. Actually, I'll probably keep my smartphone handy because I'll be broadcasting with Rogers TV on election night. So I'll just keep it handy.
Perfect. That's great.
Yeah, great stuff. Now, Greg, let's move over into the actual voting itself. One of the things that I recall from the last provincial election was that the results came quite quickly. And it was sort of like we were covering the election here on Rogers. Watching our local ridings, and boom, 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 there it was. And it was quite impressive, I must say. What changes have you brought in for this election, and will we be able to see results that quickly?
We certainly hope so, David. Last election was very transformative for us. We implemented technology in over 4,000 voting locations, slightly more than half the locations. They either had an electronic poll book and or a tabulator at those locations, so we could service electors more effectively, more efficiently. We also moved away from our traditional polls where, if you're at a community center, you might have that separated into 5 or 6 different polls of 450 people each. Now that same community center we utilize, it's a bank teller model. It's first come, first serve, so we can service the electorate much more efficiently. And then ultimately on results, it's really about just turning a key and getting the result as quickly as possible. And what that really affords is, to get the results quickly in so that the media gets to see that, the candidates and the parties all get to see that. And it also alleviates that whole period of counting at the backside, right? Because, traditionally running an election, especially our size, it's a very long day, right? We ask our staff to get up at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m., get to the poll at 8. We open for 12 hours from 9 till 9. And then often at times we'd ask them to count literally hundreds and hundreds of ballots. This way now the result comes in very, very quickly, it's very efficiently. I'm a big proponent of still maintaining that hard copy piece of paper that every Ontarian votes on, so we have a tangible record of how they have voted. And we were quite pleased last election that the results came in much quicker. We expect this election that we'll see something similar along those lines, because when the polls close, it just allows the deputy returning officer who's in charge of that poll to produce the results and call them in and get them in as quickly as possible, and then move on to the rest of the paperwork.
And having been in that position as a poll supervisor myself in a election, a federal election, I know it's a lot of hard work, but it's really interesting too. And I also wanted to just ask you about working in the election. Are there jobs available?
There certainly are, and I appreciate you asking. We hire in excess of 55,000 Ontarians. in a variety of different capacities. So anyone who is interested, I would strongly encourage them, please come to our website at elections.on.ca, fill out an application. If you can give us a day, if you can give us more than a day, we'd likely have an opportunity for you. All these positions are paid. So whether you want to come and man the poll, issue the ballots, be an information assistance, we also hire 16 and 17-year-olds to be information assistants. So there's a lot of opportunity, and we would encourage any Ontarian, please consider coming to work for us, as we lead up to the June election.
One of the things that I have repeatedly said on this show is that the best way for us to understand our system of governance is to engage it and to get involved in the electoral system. And this is a prime opportunity to become involved in how we vote and to get paid for it, which is kind of nice too. And I'm interested that you're allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to be a part of it as well. That's a great way for them to engage the system and to see it at work, because in this world, we are a democracy, and in this world, that's a pretty valuable commodity. So let's make it work.
Yeah, again, we encourage every Ontarian, and I'm glad you brought up the idea of the 16 and 17-year-olds. They can play an important role, and it gets them involved in the democratic institution early. And hopefully when they turn 18, that they'll be able to they themselves become an active, engaged citizen and be voting on a regular basis. So the earlier we can get them involved, even in a capacity as an information assistant, we definitely want to look at taking advantage of that.
My only advice to anyone planning to work is to make sure you pack a lunch and a dinner.
Yes, that is a great recommendation. Yes, we our polls are open for 12 consecutive hours. There are some, traditionally, as you would know, David, having worked through, there's some downtimes where it gets a little slower, where you can certainly have some lunch and use the facilities if necessary. But yes, you are there for the entire 12 days. So that's a great recommendation.
I also want to discuss, since we're talking about voting itself, those people who may require assistance in voting. How is that managed within the system?
So we actually have a couple of ways. One of the things we have is called the home visit, where in fact our staff will actually come to an individual's home and help facilitate the vote. So if they are incapacitated, if they have some perhaps disability that makes it very difficult for them to get to the polls, we will actually come to their home and actually facilitate the vote. And I've actually seen, quite an increase in that take up since 2011 when we introduced that. It's quite, popular amongst different segments of our society. And, we'd encourage, again, if at all interested, please reach out to your local returning officer. All of their contact information will be available as of May 4th when the writs are signed, and they can help facilitate that. The other thing that's new for this election is we actually are putting in place the ability for someone to vote completely independently through the technology we have. So we have technology that allows an individual to use either sip and puff technology, paddles. If you're visually impaired or blind, you can vote completely independently. And we're actually, as a pilot for this election, we've had this technology and we've just utilized it during area advance polls times. But for this election, we're not only utilizing it there, but we're also utilizing it on election day. So we want to make sure that Ontarians, if they need that assistance, but they still want to vote completely independently, they know they can come to the local returning office. Our staff will be there to assist them to use the technology. But once they get set up, they themselves are operating that, and they'll actually print out a ballot that is indiscernible from any other ballot, and they get to vote completely independently. So I'd encourage them to consider that as well.
Sounds like you've got all the bases covered.
Well, there's still quite a few moving parts, to be honest, David. One of the things I'm currently this week, in the last 3 weeks, I've been traveling the province, meeting with local returning officers and all of their key staff, ensuring I'm giving them last minute messages on what to expect. And one of the things that I keep saying to them is the likelihood of change is probably pretty high. So we need to be somewhat nimble, but safe to say we've built a lot of contingency plans. So we're well prepared for whatever comes our way. We will ensure for all of Ontarians we'll have a very safe, efficient election, and it'll meet those standards that they normally expect of us. Integrity and transparency. secrecy of the ballot, one vote for voter, and fair and level playing field. Those are really the covenants of how I look at the election. And I'm quite confident we will continue to adhere to the standards that Ontarians expect of us in delivering this election.
You know, it's really interesting you mentioned that, Greg, because one of the things that certainly people watch for is variances, but also we also need to take pride in the fact that our electoral system, no matter what level it's at, is actually very secure, very safe, and in the case of the province of Ontario, very accessible. It's which reminds me, there's one other group I was just thinking about, and that's people in hospital. You have them covered as well?
We do. Last election, we were in all 240 hospitals, and we intend, hopefully, again, to be in all 240 hospitals for this election. There's a 3-day period between May 16th and May 18th where we will actually go bed to bed. And this is for people who are going to be in the hospital for an extended period of time. And we can facilitate the vote regardless of the riding they're in. Because what we often see is, you know, often some individual might have to come to a large urban center for specific care or to see a specialist. But they can vote still in respect of their home riding. And we do the hospital program. As I say, we go bed to bed. Any individual who's there who's going to be there for an extended period of time, they're eligible to vote, and we facilitate that process. Last election, I think we had almost 5,000 individuals vote that way. So we intend again to offer that to make sure that if you are in hospital, unfortunately, that you still can exercise your right to vote there.
You know, Greg, I'm really impressed by what the province has done, what your office has done to make voting easy, accessible, open, transparent, so that we can have confidence in the result, whatever that may be. And I'm sure you will take a well-deserved break about 2 weeks after
Well,
election day.
I'm quite confident, David. There's still a lot of work to do to get us to June 2nd, but yeah, I'm quite confident that we've planned appropriately as would be expected of us. And you know, depending on whatever happens, you know, we're prepared to move in a certain direction, but ultimately to ensure all Ontarians that we're going to deliver a very safe, efficient election that meets all the standards that they would expect of myself and of Elections Ontario.
Well, Greg, we're just out of time, and I wanted to thank you for explaining to us all of the changes and all of the good things that happen in our Ontario election, and I'm sure we'll all be watching for the result. Greg Essensa is the Chief Electoral Officer for the province of Ontario, and it's been a pleasure to have you with us today on Politically Speaking. Actually, Rogers TV election coverage, if I really want to be accurate, but the show is actually also called Politically Speaking. So welcome, or thank you. Good to have you here, and we'll be watching.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, and thank you, friends, for being a part of our show today. Get out and vote. It's your ballot. Thank you.
Thank you.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Calling all journalism students. Omni Television is once again awarding scholarships to qualified students pursuing a career in third language journalism.
Canada is a multicultural country, and I know that there are a lot of people like me out